Yay Networks.
New Year's resolutions. I don't love them. I don't make them. But I recently ran across the concept of an audit versus a resolution, and I am really excited to share this with y'all. A quick note before we dive into today's podcast. If you like what you hear, I would love for you to subscribe to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, wherever you download your podcast. It would also be incredible if you take a minute to rate and review this podcast. Those things do matter, and they really help us. I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. While we're still in January, I wanted to address the topic of resolutions, or really a lack of New Year's resolutions. It's something that over the years I found can feel a little demoralizing. It can also feel a little repetitive or maybe a little gimmicky, that it's, what's your New Year's resolution? And then of course, the cliche that we all know, we've all experienced is within a couple of days or weeks or certainly by the end of January, it's done. It's kind of spiraled out, petered out. Here in South Louisiana, we know, of course, Mardi Gras is thrown in there. And so you've got through the holidays, then the rest of the country may be focusing on New Year's resolutions. Here, everyone's gearing up for carnival season. So Lent or Ash Wednesday is sort of like the New Orleans New Year's resolution. But still, the whole idea of making a New Year's resolution, it can feel a little trite, and it can feel like, is it something that we're really going to gear ourselves up for again? So I ran across something that I really like this concept. It's a concept of basically a New Year's audit versus a New Year's resolution. So I subscribe to the New York Times, and there's a morning newsletter. It's called The Morning Newsletter, and it arrives in my inbox every weekday morning. It's written by David Leonhardt, and he wrote kind of a little bit of a commentary just at the beginning of one a couple of weeks ago, that his approach, which I really like this, I like the word audit for some reason. His approach is that he does a food audit at the beginning of every year. And I thought that really makes a lot of sense. So what his explanation or kind of his mindset is that, every year, just like we're saying, you set out with this New Year's resolution idea, and it can feel like we're failing very quickly. What we started out with these big lofty goals, all of a sudden real life comes in, and we either forget about them or we just throw them by the wayside. But it doesn't have to be this all or nothing approach. So David's idea of this food audit is basically taking that concept, that idea of occasionally resetting some of your habits. So looking at this as a habit reset. And this audit is kind of part of that. And so looking at how we typically eat and just the typical American diet, the foods that come in, we know that if you look at across the board, about 60%, or I would say at least 60% of the foods that we as Americans across the board consume, at least 60% are what's considered ultra processed. This is the things like cookies, chips, fast food, all that. 60% of what we consume is ultra processed. And I would say at least that much. So when we look at, taking this occasional food audit can be a good thing, because we may start out with some good intentions, then little things, and especially throughout COVID, have there been little things that have slipped in that maybe started as a little bit of self-soothing, a little bit of, oh my gosh, everything around me is kind of spiraling out of control. Let me treat myself to fill in the blank. That at least kind of is like a way to treat myself. It's a way to give myself that little indulgence when everything else feels like, it might just be like complete mayhem. That could be that you started adding in ice cream every night as that little bit of a treat. It could be alcohol that has kind of found its way in. It might be chips, cookies, whatever it is. Are there certain things that, and like, we kind of think like pre-COVID, post-COVID, but there are certain things before that you wouldn't have normally kept those around, or they wouldn't have been part of your everyday repertoire. But now they're no longer just for that like occasional treat. They found their way in, they've kind of infiltrated into the daily. it may be that, it may not be something that's even every day, but just taking that, basically that assessment to say objectively, how am I doing? It's just like we would with anything. We're going to assess our finances. We're going to assess, the condition of our house. Are there certain things in our house that need to have upkeep or maintenance or need to be refurbished a little bit? It's the same thing. So I like that approach because it's not saying that we are putting ourselves on a diet. It's not saying that we're going into this restrictive mindset or we're telling ourselves no, or we're going into the state of denial. It's simply a very objective food audit. So I really, really like this approach. And just like anything, when we're talking about our spending, when we're talking about maintenance on our car, if we're not occasionally checking in on how things are going, how things are running, often things need to be tuned up, whether it's our car, our house, our finances, whatever it is. There's things that might need to just be tweaked. They might need to be tuned up to keep it that well-oiled machine, to keep things running efficiently. And our nutrition is no different. So I really like this. So personally, I don't do New Year's resolutions. I can't remember the last time that I really made a New Year's resolution. Actually, I take that back. I did a sleep resolution as we did a big sleep resolution challenge with Ariana Huffington a few years ago as part of her book. And I say a few years ago, it's probably now like 6, 7 or more. And that was a resolution I made with sleep. And I'll say I didn't. It was just like the other resolutions that we do. I really had that focus at first, and then life very quickly got in the way. And even that sleep resolution, I didn't have that follow through, so that I did do a New Year's resolution. It was sleep. But beyond that, I haven't really done what I would say, okay, it's January, I'm going to make this giant life change. But I love the idea of this life audit. You could do this in other areas of your life, obviously. But we'll talk food today about doing this food audit. So personally, I don't do New Year's resolutions. Throughout though, I guess as a dietitian, it's kind of something that we would do either with clients, personally, whatever. But I think that we can all benefit from this, myself personally, to do this informal audit of what are we eating? What are we drinking? What are our attitudes towards these foods? How are we nourishing our bodies? So when we look at this concept of an audit versus a resolution, it keeps it objective. It is less about the shoulds. Y'all know, if you've listened to this podcast before, I don't love the word should. It's a resolution is just that though. It's, I should stop eating whatever, or I'm going to do whatever it is. And it immediately kind of puts that pressure on ourselves. So that resolution, which can feel like something we should do or puts that pressure on us, that audit is just objective. So keep it that way. But I'd encourage you, I liked this idea. I wanted to share it with y'all. I'd encourage you to try this and do your best to keep it just that, very objective, just like any other type of audit would be. So looking at, like we said a bit ago, habits that may have come in. Look at what are you doing? What is your big picture of foods that you are keeping around the house? If you bring your lunch, if you prepare foods that you're bringing with you to work, what is this looking like? If you're getting takeout or you're getting meal delivery, what does that look like on the regular? And I would say, what are the things that you're doing on the vast majority of the time, and not obsessing about the things that might be that 5-10% of the time. We're talking about like big picture. What are we putting into our bodies? And what are the things that consciously are the choices that you're making for meals, for snacks? And then what are the things that may be habits or behaviors that have unconsciously crept in, snuck in? So there's going to be things there that you're like, oh no, like this is my plan. Like I do this for my breakfast. I've got this for my lunch and dinner. I'm good. But are we? Like, are there certain things that may have sort of slowly infiltrated that now what used to maybe be that little special indulgence here and there have become something that's part of our daily? It might be the level of caffeine that we're consuming. So if normally you had a cup or two of coffee in the morning, then you headed out to work, but now you're working from home, you might find that maybe you're having more coffee than you used to because it's just easily available. It's readily available right now. If your habits with work have changed, your hydration may also have changed. It may be that at work you always had access to, the filtered water thing that you're filling up your reusable bottle or whatever it might be, and you always kept that on your desk. But if you're working from home, you don't have those same behaviors. So whatever it might be, it could be your caffeine intake, it could be your hydration status, it could be the amount of movement you're getting in a day. Again, if things have changed over the past couple of years of your work patterns or whatever, your movement, the purposeful exercise may have changed, but also that non-purposeful. So I guess when we're talking about this audit, it's food, but I would also factor in movement. I would also look at sleep, have some of these change. So I would include that. You were talking food audit, but I would put in your movement and your sleep, and also behavior. So while something like caffeine intake or hydration status overall may not be specific products you're looking at, they're still behaviors. So auditing, kind of assessing how are those behaviors of my caffeine intake, my hydration status, my movement, my sleep, and then mindful eating. Or are we really finding ourselves being susceptible to mindless eating? What about late night snacking? What about midday snacking? If you're working on a project, you've got something that you're not really even thinking about it as you're kind of working your way through that bag of whatever it might be. So how much are we really bringing in mindful eating, or are we still going into that space of mindless eating? It could be what foods you're surrounding yourself with. There may be things that you used to not really keep around for whatever the reason might be, and now those things are filling your fridge, they're filling your pantry. And what's our relationship with these foods? So there's absolutely nothing wrong with having really any type of food in your household at all. The issue it depends so much on what our relationship is with these. And so, I have a lot of people over the years, it might be something specifically like Oreos. And they were like, I don't bring Oreos in because they don't feel like they have the resolve, the control over that. And if they open that package of Oreos within 2-3 days, the entire package is gone. So they just don't bring those in. And sometimes our relationship with those foods can change. We can get to a place where, okay, we could have something like Oreos in, and you have one or two at a time, and the package lasts you, ample weeks and month plus, whatever it might be that you feel like is a natural, normal amount. And we don't feel like we're out of control with those foods. So the issue is like on some of these foods that may not be specifically nutritious, but we like them. And maybe we didn't used to bring them into our house and now we do. What's our relationship with these foods? When we open that bag of chips, do we get a handful and we're good? Or do we find ourselves kind of working our way through the bag still? So I think it's really important when we're looking at the types of foods. I think we all know the foods that really aren't specifically nutritious, that are foods that we wouldn't plan to keep around when we're trying to really nourish our bodies well. But for those foods that we just like, what's our relationship with them and how well do we manage having those around? So as you're doing this food audit, I would assess those things. An example that I'll give for myself, like I love Kettle style potato chips, and Costco has the Kettle brand. They have a pink Himalayan sea salt chip. They are so good. They're so good. They're so crunchy. It's something that I love having that. I'll have like a handful of that, put them in a Ziploc. If I'm going to be doing a workout that is an intense workout that I know I'll benefit from having that source of carbs, especially, I love that as my carb source before that intense workout or after for recovery. Would I say that normally like potato chips are the best? No, but it's something that I really love. And when I have that bag, I just mentioned they're from Costco. Y'all, the bag is giant. If you are sitting with it, like say you were in the car, hypothetically, not that this has happened, maybe it has. You're in the car. We got a bag from Costco. I'll just say it. We got a bag from Costco and we were running errands. And I was like, gosh, I was hungry. And I said, let's have some. So y'all, we opened the bag. We're reaching behind us and I'm crying laughing because the bag on the seat, it's essentially like as tall as like my torso is. It's a huge bag. So you can imagine if I didn't feel like I had a good handle on something like potato chips, bringing a Costco size bag of these chips that I really love into our house could be really, maybe not a great thing if it was something that I didn't feel like I could manage that well. I think it's got like 32 servings. Let's be honest, no matter what our relationship is with carbs or food or what we need, we don't need to work our way through a Costco bag of chips. So I feel really great about the fact that, whereas maybe in college or in my 20s, it wasn't something that I felt like if that bag of chips was open, I felt like it was calling my name. I felt like I kept wanting to go to the pantry and have more and more of it. I don't feel that way now. I feel very balanced about it. So for me, long explanation for chips, but that's one that I actually have given that thought. I guess sort of an informal audit as I was making that decision to buy this, keeping it in the house. And it was something that I didn't feel like that had control over me or control over kind of, the way that people say it, and I totally get this, is it's as if that food is like maybe in that pantry or in your fridge. And it's like just calling your name and you can't forget that it's in there. I don't like that feeling. I don't love that. And some people, it may be something that you may say, well, I need to get past that. And sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. And if we're not past that yet, that's okay too. But as we're doing this food audit and we look at what are we surrounding ourselves with, let's do our best to surround ourselves with foods that are really nourishing. For those foods that aren't specifically what we would call nutritious, but we really like them, and they can absolutely fit into some part of our day and our routine, our week, or whatever it might be, do we feel like we have that sense of control over them? So I would, as you're doing kind of part of your audit, big, long example, for me, it's potato chips, but whatever your thing is, I would include that in your audit. So what types of foods do you have in there? They don't all have to be so specifically nutritious. Those that aren't, what is your relationship with them? And how do you feel about having these? How do you manage having these things around you? And the last thing I'll say about that is if these foods are edging out other more nutritious foods, if you're reaching for those foods in favor of instead of other more nutritious foods, I would also reconsider that in this food audit that we're doing. Let's take a minute to talk about Nutrafol, sponsor for this week's episode. The nutrients and Nutrafol supplements support our healthy hair growth from within by targeting the 5 root causes of thinning: stress, hormones, environment, nutrition, and metabolism. Nutrafol is a physician-formulated nutritional supplement that is made with potent botanicals. So no matter your stage in life, Nutrafol has a solution. They offer targeted formulas for women and men that are clinically shown to improve hair growth and thickness through all stages of our life with medical grade, natural ingredients that also support our whole body health. So it is possible to grow thicker, healthier hair and support our show by going to Nutrafol.com, entering promo code FUELED to save $15 off your first month's subscription. This is their best offer anywhere. It's only available to U.S. customers for a limited time. Plus, free shipping on every order. Get $15 off at Nutrafol.com. That's spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code FUELED. So loosely doing this assessment, kind of taking a look at, it could be, in retrospect, what has this past week been in terms of, meals, snacks through the day. It could be keeping a food log, or it could just be having that mindfulness, that awareness over the next week, 2 weeks, just kind of looking to see and kind of paying attention to what these habits are, what we're actually consuming. And it can actually be a physical, almost like informal inventory of your space. What do I have as those go-to snacks on the shelf in the pantry? What do I have in my freezer and my fridge? What am I reaching for when I'm hungry for something last minute if I don't have something planned? What am I preparing for these meals? So what does this audit reveal? It's going to reveal for us a couple of things. What's going well? What do we want to continue? And it's going to reveal maybe what could use some improvement. And it's not to say, again, that these things are bad. It doesn't really matter what your thing is. I just talked about chips with me. Whatever your thing is on that, it might not be the best nutritionally. That doesn't mean it's like a bad thing that you can't keep. What's your relationship with that? And can it use some improvement? Do we need to maybe set some other boundaries around that? Which brings us to the next topic on this. So as you're doing this food audit, we're kind of doing this assessment, physical assessment, what's in your space, an assessment of what we're consuming over the course of a couple of days, a week, 2 weeks. Then it comes to, okay, well, once we've made this assessment, once we've done this audit, we've seen what it's revealed, we see what's going really well and what's not, and what areas that we do. And again, remember to try to be as objective as possible. Just like a company would be audited, finances can be audited. That is very objective. It's not judging as a good or a bad. It's not labeling our behavior as good or bad. I'm being good, I'm being bad. An audit is very, very objective. So we want to be this way as much as possible. So what does it reveal? What's going well? What's not? What could use some improvement? What do we want to keep doing? What do we want to do more of? So when we look at, okay, how do I do this without really being too obsessive about it? There's the conversation about, do we put rules around food or no rules? When we first hear rules, the first thing that I think is we're going to rebel against those rules. So as soon as we tell ourselves, I can't have something, that's the first thing that we're going to want. And I don't like the way that feels to tell myself I can't have something. I don't like the way it sounds when I hear someone else say, I can't have that, or I'm not allowed to have that. That doesn't sound good. It doesn't feel good. So my first kind of reaction a lot of times when I hear the word rules is, I don't like that. I don't want rules being put on me. We have so many other things that are put onto our schedule or things that we like, quote, need to do through our days. The last thing we want is more rules being put on us with food. However, there are some rules that are okay. And sometimes having what we might, you could find another word for it. It may be, the word is not rules, but having some just big picture parameters in place that are things that you make sure that you do. It could be as simple as, okay, one of the rules is that you don't have a sugary white carb breakfast, that you try to make sure that your rule is that breakfast always has, a significant amount of protein in it. That may be that. And then that helps that if you're taking an early flight in the morning and they're handing out cookies on the airplane, or you go into work and for that 9 o'clock team meeting, they've got birthday cake for someone, whatever it might be. When you kind of have that parameter, that rule, that breakfast or that first part of your day or whatever it might be is going to be focused on protein and fiber or whatever that might be and not sugar. Well, that sort of helps provide that guidance for the behavior when that other not normal situation comes up. I'm going to try to give some other examples to, I guess, try to reinforce or give better idea of what I'm trying to say about the rules or no rules, because I do think at times having rules, we may not think of them as rules, but they're kind of guiding principles. I think a guiding principle is a really good way to say it. It may be sugar at breakfast, or you don't have sugary cereals at breakfast, or you limit the sugary drinks, beverages. If you are going to have something that's maybe a refined processed carb, like it's king cake season, carnival season here in New Orleans. But if you're going to have king cake or you're going to have cookies or chips or whatever, that your guiding principle is that if you're going to have that as part of an afternoon snack, you're also going to pair it with a source of protein, or you're going to have that protein first. You're going to have what we might call like real food before the snacks. You're going to have that fish and vegetables before you're going to have fill in the blank with whatever that other less nutritious thing may be. But when we look at these guiding principles, which I think can feel better than saying the word rule, the idea of this is it can be really helpful for people to automate at least some parts of our day. So when you think about all the decisions that many of us are making every day, from the time we wake up till the time you go to bed, there's a lot of decisions. There's decisions to do with home, with family, with work. There's just so many things that we're deciding which path are we going to take or what step are we going to do throughout our day. What can be helpful to a lot of people is to automate our eating to some degree. It can help us to not obsess so much about it. So to use myself as an example, during the day, many times there's meetings, there's things back to back. So I don't want to think a lot about, what I'm going to eat at this time through the day. I want to just have it there at the ready. It can just fit seamlessly into the rest of what I have going on during the day. For me, dinner is the time that things really start to slow down. Things start to just really dial back. I'm usually having dinner with my husband. That's our time that we're catching up through the day. We are, really, it's the slowest time. It's the slowest time that I'm really enjoying. I'm really savoring. I want something that's going to be different. It's interesting. What are we in the mood for right now? That dinner is much more the variable, much more the wild card. So for me, what works when we're talking about automating a bit is that I have certain things that I know work well for me in the morning, midday, mid-afternoon different foods, different drinks that I know kind of within this rotation, I'm going to reach for one of these things at these different times of the day. I won't even get into what that looks like because it's going to be very, very different for all of us. But if there's certain things, you have 2 or 3 things that work well for you for breakfast, for lunch, for snacks, and you sort of automate throughout the day. And then your dinner is where you've got that variety in there. It may be different for you. Maybe that lunchtime, you go out with coworkers a lot for lunch, and that lunchtime is really where you've got that variety. But you're not really having to think about what am I going to be doing for breakfast or my snacks or whatever that might be. So we're talking about automating. The idea of automating is not to put ourselves on a regimented thing. And it only is going to work if the benefit of this is that it's one less thing for you to think about. You've got a lot of these things here that you enjoy. It can be one of any of these things are going to work for that breakfast, that lunch, that afternoon snack, whatever it might be. The idea of automating it is to reduce the amount of thought that we're having to put into what we're eating, especially at a time when our days might be filled with a whole lot of other thoughts. And so we can kind of really just make it easy for ourselves. Some people do meal prep on Sundays. They're preparing a lot of their meals for the week. It could be their breakfast, their lunches, whatever it might be. The idea of it is to take the guesswork and any level of obsessiveness about it out. And then again, leaving some of that time for really being flexible. So whether it's with family, whether it's with friends, it's stuff that your kids love. Absolutely, I encourage that you've got that space that when you are having those meals with your family, with your kids, with your friends, whatever it is, give yourself that freedom, that flexibility to have, to savor, to just really enjoy what you love. So when we come back to that conversation of rules, no rules, guiding principles or not, a lot of us have heard of like the 80-20 rule, like and a rule there. But the 80-20 concept that 80% of what we eat, 80% of what we do are things that are really nourishing for ourselves, 20% isn't. So when we're doing something like what we're talking about of maybe automating a large part or certain parts of our day, we're also kind of doing that naturally. That 80% is what we've already planned, we've thought through, whether it was meal prep or whatever else it is, that we kind of know this is what I'm going to be doing for these meals and snacks. But that over there that I'm having with my kids, with my friends, with my spouse, with my partner, that's where it's a little more wild card. I'm going to be much more flexible with that. There's your 20% often. So I hope that helps some. So as we're talking about, okay, doing this audit, which I love the concept of an audit versus a resolution. That audit can be on specific foods, what's around us. It can be on our behaviors. How are we handling our hydration, our caffeine intake, our movement, our sleep, our level of mindful eating, or are there some things that are mindless eating that we might feel are getting the best of us? So doing this audit versus this resolution, looking at truly, honestly being open to what does this audit reveal? What's going well? What can use some improvement? And then on those things that can use improvement, how much do we want to incorporate something that may be automating during our day so that we kind of put ourselves on autopilot? We don't have to think, we don't have to obsess about that, but we know that these are our go-to nourishing things that we're going to keep around. And then we have that area, that time of our day, our week, whatever it might be, that is our wild card. It's that flexibility. It's just that spontaneity, going out to eat. We're not sure where it's going to be or exactly what we'll have. And that kind of helps us also really easily fall into that 80-20 approach. I would also say that as we're looking at automating some of these healthful behaviors and kind of putting ourselves into a pattern that we don't really have to think about these things, we don't have to obsess about them. Decide too, what are some of these non-negotiables that you feel so much better with? And it may be a certain level of fluid that that when you drink this much fluid, it's helping with your energy. Your hydration status is optimized. It might be certain vitamins or supplements. It might be other things that you're adding into your day that leave you feeling really, really good. To make it easier on ourselves, these are also the types of things that we talk about that let's just automate that. Let's put it in there so that it's part of your normal routine. Whatever you need to do to make it really easy for yourself to have that at the ready, that you don't have to think of it. So we're talking about these food rules or no rules, or we're talking about guiding principles or not, or we're talking about automating these healthful behaviors. Again, rules can feel like something we want to rebel against immediately. but realizing that guiding principles, if that makes us feel better about saying that, or automating these healthful behaviors, it can be so helpful because we may not have the time or the focus or the diligence, the energy, the patience. To think about constantly every choice that we're going to make about what we're putting into our bodies. And that's where something like automating it and just kind of having, we know these are the choices that we're typically going to reach for breakfast, for lunch, for snacks, whatever it might be, that can be so helpful to basically reduce the level of obsessiveness that can happen around healthier eating. And finally, as we're looking at, okay, this concept of audit versus resolution, I would just encourage all of us to, if we see or feel that there's a space where we are obsessing, where we're putting so much time and energy into food and what we're going to eat or not eat, or these rules that we're telling ourselves we can't have certain things, I would really encourage you to do everything possible to try to let that go. Working with a registered dietitian can be incredibly helpful. I'll put in the link for our show notes, our dietitian's contact for Oshner Fitness Center. They can also do virtual visits, by the way. Working with a therapist, a behavioral therapist, can really be helpful on this. But as much as possible, I would encourage us, if there's anything that I would say would be part of this New Year's reset or this audit, is identifying the things that we are obsessing about and how can we release these as much as possible. It does not feel good to have a layer of guilt around eating, a layer of guilt around choices that we're making. So as much as possible, trying to remove the labeling of our behaviors as good or bad, to also gauge what success looks like, possibly in a very different way than we have before. Your goal, your end goal may be a weight goal. It may be pounds lost. But instead of gauging your success on stepping on the scale every single day, because there can be a lot of variability there, a whole lot of other reasons scale can vary. Muscle mass, for one, hydration status, fluid retention. There's just so much. So stepping on that scale daily can be incredibly demoralizing. It can feel very defeating. So instead, when we're looking at, okay, even if that long-term goal is weight loss, gauging ourselves and gauging our success, not by that number, but gauging our success by those behaviors. Because ultimately the behaviors that we're putting together one after another, behind the other, these habits and these behaviors and these choices that we're making, string enough of these together, we're going to start to see that physical change that we're striving for. But if all we're looking at as that measure of success is that physical change, it can take longer to happen than what we hope it would be. It can also feel very much out of our control. Whereas when we start to look at measuring success by our choices, our habits, stringing these together to form these behaviors, and we start to gauge these and look at the patterns that we're choosing in these, it can feel so much more. It is so much more in our control. Again, going back to, though, don't beat yourself up. Give yourself some grace. Give yourself that level of forgiveness that you would give a friend. So just because maybe that choice is not something that you feel is optimal nutritionally, if you made that choice, understand what was behind it. Were there certain things that triggered what was maybe not a great nutritious choice? Was there certain things around that event? We look at triggers being people, places, things. What happened around that event that maybe triggered a not so nutritious choice? And sometimes that choice is like me with the chips. I like them. I love having that as that carb source, especially if I'm going to go do a more intense workout. I'm going to want to have those things. So sometimes that choice that may not be the most nutritious choice is still a very conscious choice that you don't feel bad about. That's fine. But when it's a choice that maybe felt like you didn't have much control and you felt like you were maybe slipping in your level of resolve, start to look at what was behind that choice. What were some of the triggers that ended up in whatever that decision, that choice, that path that was taken? So as we said, looking at this audit as a very objective look at our behaviors, the foods and things that are kind of filling our space. And then as we start to look at how we're measuring success, looking at the choices, our mindset, the habits and the behaviors that are getting strung together one after another, looking at those, because that is what is in our control so much more than a number or whatever that other physical measure might be. So I hope this has been helpful for you. I hope it has helped you to think about this kind of New Year's reset in a little bit different light, thinking of it in a much less personal way, thinking of it in a much more objective way, not grading ourselves in this personal way, and really looking at it objectively and looking at it just like you would any other, how are we going to make sure everything else around us is running as efficiently as possible? Our budgets, our cars, our homes, all these things that do need a little bit of upkeep. They need a little bit of assessment, a little bit of maintenance, kind of taking that closer look, peeling the layers back a little bit, looking at it, seeing what's up. What do we need to kind of tune up or tweak a little bit? And then let's get on with things. So I would encourage you to kind of think about that approach a bit if this audit versus resolution approach helps you. And then as you do uncover some things to improve that could use some improvement, again, identifying and praising yourself. Give yourself that credit for what's really working well. What do you want to do more of that's working so well? And then the things that could use some improvement, be, again, very objective. Is this something that you've got the resources to work on? Is this something that you feel comfortable working on? Is it something that working with an expert, a dietitian or behavioral therapist might be more beneficial for you? And again, giving yourself that fairness and that objectivity that you would if it was a coworker, a friend, a colleague, your best friend sharing this with you. Over the coming months, I'll have different experts that will be talking about all different topics. One that I'm really excited for you guys to hear is Dr. Herman Poncer talking about the science of metabolism. So he had a really tremendous study that came out this past fall of 2021. He has a fantastic book on metabolism. It's called Burn. I will have lots of experts like Dr. Poncer coming up that can help us to continue to learn more about our bodies, how they work, our metabolisms, that take the guesswork out of it and things that we may feel are so out of our control. Understanding it on a deeper level can make it feel so much less intimidating, give us such a better feeling of autonomy and that the choices we make matter, can help us to understand our bodies even more, help us to let go of these old ideas that might be holding us back from really living our best life possible. As always, let me know what you think. As you incorporate some of these strategies into your own life, I always want to hear about it. I am registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. If you would like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.